Good afternoon in what is a beautiful spring day in Australia, in Sydney, Australia. It's absolutely stunning. Until this webinar, I was wearing short sleeves. It's beautiful. Hope it's as nice where you are as well. Today I wanted to talk to you about mental health and a toolkit for troubled times, brought to you by yours truly, me, Greg Weiss. I'm the founder and director of Career 365, and I'm looking forward to spending some time with you here. The very first thing I want to be able to do is to just ask people to say hello. I've got a couple of responses. Can I just get you saying that you can hear me loud and clear? Just LAC, loud and clear, or loud and clear if you're a good typist. Just want to make sure we got that before we got a little bit of a technical check-in. And what I want to be able to do also is just to ask you, if you can, just to hold back or allow me to hold back on answering any questions that you might have. But you can always post them in the chat window. Great, I've got LACs coming through, which is fantastic. So here we are. Let me just come back to here. So it's a great topic, and one disclaimer, if I can, and that is that I'm no professionally trained counsellor, but I've dealt with people of all different emotions. This week I had a particularly difficult case of somebody who I was going through some very significant issues, and I was able not to directly help them, but to indirectly help them to some broader resources. So if you do need some of that help, please let me know. So what I can do is I can really support you as we deepen our relationship. It may not be me directly being able to help, but hopefully today's webinar will give some insights into some tools and otherwise that you can use. I'm going to go into the presentation here and start it. And I may actually even turn off my my visual at the moment, so we can just have the presentation itself. And it is troubling times, as we all know. And if we have to hear the word COVID one more time today, we'll probably all scream. I'm in Sydney. We've got other attendees in other parts of Australia. And for those of you abroad, we happen to have people in Victoria who are still in what was promised to be a 6-week lockdown, but potentially could be a lot longer than that. And it's been a very strict lockdown indeed. So these are difficult times, which deals then with mental health. And I was talking to somebody else just yesterday who, and I'll put this back on whilst we're talking here. I spoke with a person who's involved with a similar field to what I do, albeit in recruitment and coaching. And she was talking to me about the mental health of women and the difficulty that they have. So there are a whole lot of, I was talking to her about some people more close to my age as well. So everybody's going through difficult times. It's actually, I guess, how we handle these things. Let me just go through. So we are just to help you understand also that in your modules, we have a module bundle, which you'll see here, how to feel better about your situation. And I've had some feedback from people who have said that just these few modules here, this handful of modules, has helped them really get their heads around a few things. There are some fantastic resources that I really rate. Acceptance and commitment therapy with Russ Harris. There's CBT stuff, but I don't. And there's positive psychology with Martin Seligman and the like. And a number of these resources are mentioned in these particular modules. But I do want to go through what times we're in, because as we started off about troubled times, let's just have a look at this particular slide here. But I do want to talk about Vuca. And Vuca is a term, VUCA, is a term coined by the United States military and more recently the global business community. And many describe our lives, businesses, and the global economy as Vuca, or, hey, it's crazy out there, as Nathan Dennett and James Lamone put it in Harvard Business Review. So why Vuca? Vuca stands for V for volatility. The speed in which industry and the global economy has recently changed was inevitable with the fluctuations in demand, but also supply chains. U as in Vuca stands for uncertainty. We now live in an uncertain environment in terms of how we can expect our lives amid often changing restrictions and how we now work and how and when the economy will sustainably recover. Complexity, the C in Vuca, it's been a complex balancing act to protect the health of people, but also attempt to safeguard the economy of entire nations when many industries have been unable to operate at all or as usual. And A in Vuca stands for ambiguity. Ambiguity around the news, what's fact versus option, have made life on a daily basis difficult to interpret. So not option, I meant opinion. So in these types of situations, our connectivity and access to continuous media coverage can be beneficial, but also a burden. And after all, it's not just COVID that's contagious, but panic, the spread of misinformation and poor decision-making as well. And the media can tell, if you let it, the media can fuel fires in our own minds. So this is the reality that we're in. It's because of a Vuca environment, as well as a number of other drivers, COVID, technology, outsourcing, offshoring, restructuring, that long-term employment's not around anymore. It's just not the norm. But being long-term employable is, and that's a whole different topic which we can address in another webinar. So I want to be able to actually take you through a few things here around the emotional experience of change. And I thought, look, frankly, let's talk through sad, mad, glad, scared, shell-shocked, and embarrassed. But before we get into this, probably a good idea is just to talk a little bit about these particular emotions of change. So, whether you've had change come about willingly or not, there's a certain amount of emotional baggage that can affect where you go from here. And the participants on this call, the participants on this webinar are typically people who are participating, going through the Career 365 outplacement program. And so I want to be able to actually help you through a few things. The first one here is sad. It's upsetting when you're forcibly excluded from a workplace where you were trying your best. You may have worked there for a long time, perhaps even treating the business with as much respect as if it were your own. It's sad to leave behind co-workers you've worked alongside with day in, day out. It can even be hard to move on from customers that you've gone out of your way to help and as a result formed great relationships with. So I'm just going to give a top line emotional experience sort of context with all these sort of broad emotions. And so bear with me as we sort of don't deep dive into these, but as we go a little bit into each. With mad, if you've been let go, you're going to be probably angry at your employer for not being able to keep you on the books or not being able to keep their business afloat or beating yourself up for choosing what's become a vulnerable career path. I'm sure that you're angry at the world because this happened to you and it wasn't outside your control. That's if you're feeling mad. Then I meet people who are actually glad that they've been let go when an occupational role isn't the right fit. People in this category feel happy to move on, whether it's of their own choosing or not. Even if the entire change isn't a happy one, you might find elements of relief in not having to work alongside a particular person, perform an undesirable task, get away from a workspace that you never felt at home in, remain in roles that others have cast you in, giving you a chance to develop a new identity. Although you're fearful of what the future holds, some part of you is, in actual fact, happy to embrace the freedom you now have in seeking a different and hopefully better opportunity. So that's sad, mad, glad. What about scared, shell-shocked, and embarrassed? With scared, the unknown scares us all. When you're cast back into the job search pool, you'll be plagued by questions such as, and these are pretty common, how long is it going to take me to find a job? What if I find it's going to be a lot harder than I expected to find that job? What if I don't like any of the opportunities and have to settle? They're three really common questions that are in the minds of participants that I deal with. And you might be scared of letting your family down as well, fearful how people will react to your changing situation and scared for the impact this period will have on your future retirement plans. So that's scared. What about shell-shocked? Well, shell-shocked, while triggers for post-traumatic stress disorder, or better known as PTSD, are classed as extreme events, a less intense but unpleasant experience can also trigger PTSD-like symptoms. These may include distress, a racing heart, irritability, and insomnia, just to name several. Therefore, it's not unreasonable to feel as though you are shell-shocked when experiencing an emotionally disturbing event like job loss. And then embarrassed. You're in good company with significant numbers of people having lost their jobs as a result of the pandemic, but knowing that this may not stop feelings of embarrassment from surfacing. You might never have relied on government financial assistance before, and ashamed potentially at the prospect of even doing so whilst you're in between jobs now. You might feel embarrassed to go home and tell your partner or family that you no longer have the job that your household has relied on. You might find it awkward to discuss your situation amongst friends as well. It's pretty common, but reframing would actually help that. And it's normal to feel this way, but the sooner you can accept that what's happened was outside your control, you'll be able to take action that counts. And so when I deal with people, almost in the first meeting that we actually meet up, you've probably experienced this in terms of whenever I've dealt with you or others, and that is that I ask a series of questions, but one of which happens to actually be around checking in about where you're exactly at right now. And it's probably natural to feel, I'm going to go backwards here, all of these at some particular point in time, probably shell-shocked initially, then the whole change cycle, which we're going to get to as well. Okay, so this is actually this next section you may have heard of a lady called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and her work was all around a book called On Death and Dying. I know it might sound terrible here, but there's a strong analogy between if you're not familiar with the field of this, but it's to do with a similarity of when somebody actually has death and the shocks in one's life. So let's go through this because when you make sense of the situation, let's go a little deeper. Change is inevitable. It's how you cope with it that matters. And so Kubler-Ross said there are 4 stages of reacting to change. And the one is shock and disorientation. When bad news is fresh, you won't be able to see a logical path forward. You'll be reeling as your mind races to uncover all the ways this is going to affect your life. It'll take time to make sense of the situation. So I ask you, have you been there? Have you been in shock and disorientation? Natural to feel like that. What about anger and other emotional responses? And like those 6 emotions we talked about before, which is sad, mad, glad, scared, shell-shocked, and embarrassed, you'll progress through a range of emotions that you'll need to feel before you can entirely move on with your life. The key to this stage is managing your strong feelings without suppressing them. So that's anger and emotional responses. What about coming to terms with the new situation? And in this stage, you start to develop strategies for applying yourself in a new direction. A more optimistic outlook will help you explore how this change could lead to new opportunities. And these modules that we have will help form some of the basis for this. But also acceptance and moving forward is a time when it's time to realize that you've learned much from your previous experience, and a fulfilling career is still very possible. You have a plan of attack for the future and you're ready to follow it. And that doesn't happen necessarily immediately, but it can happen with really getting into your program, having your coach support you and talking through this situation so you know what your roadmap is. I often meet people, say when I'm coaching you in outplacement context, and I find that there's a really disorientated individual I'm meeting, say through Zoom or otherwise, and over that first session, it's often a really good feeling about saying, okay, I've got a way forward. So that's point 4. One important thing about this also is making sense of the situation according to Kubler-Ross is we can feel all of these in different sequences or at different times of the day even. And so it's not 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. It happens to potentially be a whole mishmash of these things. But how good would it be to actually have an acceptance of things and then having a game plan how to move forward? And so with this, we actually have an approach that I wanted to be able to actually talk to you about, because you may not have been familiar with this. So we've talked about Kubler-Ross, and with her we have cycles of different stages as we've talked about, but this one here, the emotional guidance scale, is probably a little bit different to what you may have actually come across, and it comes from a different space than what you may have traditionally looked at, like something like other models to do with happiness or otherwise. And a common one that people might be familiar with is Maslow, but this one here is called the Emotional Guidance Scale, and I've had this drawn for my new book. But you can see here that the way this works is, let's take it from the bottom, and the whole idea is, you can see on the left-hand side, boredom, then contentment, then hopefulness, then optimism, then belief, then happiness, passion, and then the top ones of joy, appreciation, freedom, and love. Now, who came up with this? It's called the Abraham Hicks Emotional Guidance Scale because it's a powerful model, and it's especially relevant during these COVID-19 times when most of us are have experienced some form of isolation. And I'm sure you've noticed that it's close to impossible to expect anyone to switch states from feelings of emotional despair to feelings of joy. But the point of this is that by edging incrementally from one state to the next, one can indeed move up the Abraham Hicks emotional scale and feel happier. Okay, so the scale is a list of commonly felt emotions ranging from the top, joy, appreciation, freedom, love, and empowerment, the highest, to feelings at the very bottom here, which is the feelings of despair, desperation, grief, and powerlessness. And the point is that if you went from, say, boredom to joy, appreciation, freedom, and love at the very top here, it's too far. And what this Abraham Hicks model suggests is that we move, for example, from one point to the other incrementally. So you can go, for example, from say halfway up there on the right-hand side is optimism. You can go from optimism to passion, and from quite easily, but it's very, very difficult to make a quantum jump from boredom through to joy. So let me just go a little bit deeper on this model because it might be new to you, and you can certainly have a look at typing in Abraham Hicks emotional guidance scale into YouTube and getting a few really good further insights into it in a more deep level. But when you want to feel better, you can identify where you are on the emotional scale and proactively reach for better feeling thoughts that lead to better feeling outcomes. So once you're stable in a new emotion, you've moved up that scale. That's an important thing to know. Once you're stable in a new emotion, you've moved up the scale. Then you continue the practice of reaching for better feeling thoughts, thereby moving up the emotional scale to a higher level emotion. So any of us can actually slip down the scale at any particular point in time. But the idea is just to be able to then acknowledge the place where we're at and incrementally move up. So the emotional scale was described by, as I said, by Abraham Hicks, and it's a really, really powerful model itself. And it's a slower process, but there's a way of being able to really make your way up. So even if you can see on this slide here about some terribly desperate feelings down the bottom, if you incrementally make your way up from, say, even jealousy to hatred and rage to revenge to discouragement to anger and blame and worry, these are pretty negative emotions, but it's not saying that there's anything wrong with them, but eventually, but it's impossible to go from a powerless victim to joy and appreciation, freedom and love, isn't it? But if you acknowledge where you're at, you can make a very incremental move towards the more positive end of this, which happens to be those on this particular slide. So I just thought I'd share this with you. Again, the resource that I'd suggest you look up more deeply on this would end up actually being around in YouTube, some fabulous videos on this side of things. What about reframing? The importance of reframing is highlighted by positive psychology experts who teach the importance of not fusing with your situation, F-U-S-I-N-G, fusing, to glue with. Okay, so fusing to your situation means accepting it as the reality of who you are. For instance, if you have fused with your job loss or your inability to find employment, if you say, I'm unemployed. So let me just make sure I said this correctly. So fusing to your situation means accepting it as the reality of who you are. For example, if you've fused with your job loss or inability to find employment, if you say, for example, I'm unemployed, I'd rather you reframe things and say, right now I'm in a situation where I'm without a job. See the difference there? It's a fine but very powerful distinction in those two statements. The difference between I'm unemployed and right now I'm in a situation where I am without a job. So that's where reframing and the heart of it, language, comes in. Instead of talking about loss, turn the conversation to your occupational change. So one way to reframe your situation is to think about where you'll be going next in your career. In a job interview, the way you might describe the turns your career has taken can make a very big impression. If an interviewer asks, were you laid off? Your response might be, the company was forced to let people go as a result of the pandemic. My goal now is blah, blah, blah. So it points to what your plan is going forward rather than dwelling on the discomfort of the past. Can you see how important that is? And imagine the questions you might be asked in interviews and think about how you can recast the situation in a more positive light while maintaining honesty, of course. So in the same way, recognizing where you are at the emotional guidance scale is very helpful. So rather than fusing with I am angry, you're better off reframing this by a couple of examples I can give you here. For example, acknowledging where you're at currently in the cycle at any given point, or saying to yourself, right now I'm feeling angry about my current situation, but I'm determined that this will pass. So that's a reframing perspective itself. And then what about searching for acceptance? And then when job loss has had you reeling, accepting your situation may seem a long way off. But when you're starting to make progress up the emotional guidance scale and you're using the reframing practices, acceptance is within your grasp. So reaching positive acceptance of your own occupational change provides a sense of stability and often calm objectivity. When you've reached the acceptance stage, you'll be well and truly ready to begin a new role without dragging the emotional baggage of your job loss with you. Once you've reached this stage, it's essential to anchor yourself here so that you don't risk sliding backwards if you experience setbacks in any form of job search. So the important thing to know is that there's a reason that you're feeling what you're feeling. If you're having difficulty accepting this change, you'll find yourself in a better place if you let your emotions run your course or run their course. So the key to transforming your outlook is not to try to force your feelings into behaving. You aren't supposed to feel a specific way, so repressing yourself really won't help. Let yourself feel what you are feeling. It's completely legitimate. At the same time, you don't want to wallow in despair now that you understand techniques for moving beyond this. So this is important. I'm not at all saying to you that the feelings of these things here are anything to not feel, and it wouldn't be, and they're not valid feelings. On the contrary, but the question is, how can you move beyond this feeling to the point where you can actually start to explore more desire in these areas? So we've got boredom here and overlapping clearly here, but we've got these contentment, hopefulness, and so on and so forth. Wouldn't we want to feel here much better than this? Any case, so that's what I wanted to be able to just touch on here. Maybe food for thoughts and questions. Whilst we're talking about mental health, I thought what I'd do is let's use the term pivot and talk about some things that you can do rather than just some perspectives on these things. And what I want to do is talk about some things that you can do right now that may help you get up the Abraham Hicks emotional scale. So here are some de-stressors that I found from the proverbial net, but also from people who are experts in this side of things. Movement's a really important thing. So here's a de-stressor: take a 10-minute walk. So what I've said here is, according to experts, if you take a walk, it'll help it'll help produce, that should actually say produce endorphins in the system that it will produce endorphins and reduce, sorry, there's a typo here, and it'll actually help to replace things that like cortisol that causes stress. What about mindfulness? Learning to focus on your breathing can help you reduce your stress. And so meditation, for example, is a mindfulness practice among many others. If you take that 10-minute walk and all you focused on was just saying left, right, as you're taking steps, it will be very difficult to think about anything else. And it's proven practice of mindfulness. How about creating an exercise regime? And from this perspective, anything that can give you an increase in your heartbeat, go at the level that you feel you're comfortable with, and then just maybe a tad more, so that you get your heartbeat going up. It creates a much more oxygenation within your body, and a rush of other benefits that we're going to go into as well. And we all know about the benefits of exercise. I met with somebody yesterday who encouraged me yet again to write a journal, and it might be helpful. And in our courses, we talk about this, about writing a reflection journal. And that is just writing down things, because there are some subconscious things that will come up, some things that will come up from your subconscious that you then become conscious of. And it can actually be some self-defeating self-talk that may be causing you some form of stress. So writing a reflection journal, and especially about what you are grateful for in life, blue sky, freedoms to move around, fresh air, all those sorts of things, glad you got your health, all those sorts of things are very, very important. And then organizing yourself. And that could be anything from, so one of the people who are going through the program and I coached today is finding an enormous amount of joy about channeling Marie Kondo and getting her apartment in order, which is something that she's just not had the time to do. Or it may be about having a structured day when you have very little structure. The problem with working from home and the problem with no work but being at home is it's important to organize yourself and having some form of structure and scaffolding from that perspective. So these six, even with the these five, even with the slight typos, are really good methods for you being able to de-stress. And if you've attended a previous webinar of mine, I do want to be able to now introduce you to a few happy chemicals, some of which I've started to allude to. But if we actually have a look at these broad hormones, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, then what are the pathways to actually to you getting these and feeling more up? So these are some easy pathways that some people have suggested that we follow, and so it could be, for example, anything like anything like exercise, anything like having a cuddle from a pet, anything like being amongst people that you care and love, anything like going into finding out what you enjoy doing. So I was exploring only yesterday things that gave me a heck of a lot of joy. And I reflected how wonderful I feel after I swim. Now, I swim pretty regularly, but after I swim and body surf, say at Bondi Beach, and how good is catching a wave and just getting into the freshness of the salt water and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to throw myself in on the weekend to really do that, and I would encourage you doing the same thing. Look, I'm not encouraging the use of the consumption of chocolate, but it's actually also proven that that you get some happiness out of dark chocolate, especially, apparently. So it's the I think it's the serotonin hormone here. Okay. But the other thing I wanted to actually talk to you about is something I alluded to 5 minutes ago, and that was about routines and mini habits. And you may have actually seen this as well. And this is to do with when we're working from home, and especially if you don't have some structure to your day, because you used to go off to work, or you used to even working from home in the last, say, 6, 7, 8 months before during COVID, when it started. We still had some structure around working from home, but if you've recently, for example, been made redundant, that those routines are out. And so how do you build up a routine? And the example I often use about mini habits, I'm going to use again, but routines, as we've talked about, are a really important. Structure up your day so that you can know that, so that you have certain goals, certain things that you do that can bring back some sort of structure rather than drift. Drifting is a very difficult thing for people to feel happy about. Mini habits. Okay, the example that I often use is, say I have a habit to exercise and to do a plank for core muscle improvement, and I want to do a plank for a minute, say, per day. But I get up in the morning and I'm feeling pretty ordinary, and I'm just thinking, no, I just don't really want to do it. The idea the idea of a mini habit is to not do a plank, because the idea of a habit is to do things repetitively, and that's what makes a habit. So if you get up in the morning and just don't want to do the plank for a minute, the idea of a mini habit is just to do it, and get down on the ground and just start it. And just by the act of starting means that you're actually at the point where you can most likely, now that you're down on the ground, continue on for, say, half a minute. Now, half a minute's much better than nothing at all. And so there's a lot of psychology and happiness around routines and these mini habits. Here we are. I wanted to be able to actually, let's just go quickly through here. You can see the dopamine here, the oxytocin. You can see the serotonin here. And I was wrong about the dark chocolate with serotonin. Apparently, it's with the endorphin side of things. So he's up. How good would watching some Seinfeld or Everybody Loves Raymond or just some sort of crazy comedy show and having a really good laugh. So these are great. And by the way, this presentation will be up in the show notes as well. Okay. Any case, I just thought what I'd do is I'd just share that with you. I'm actually excited to be able to share with you the relaunch of my new books. I'm actually picking up Career Networking today from the printer. Yoo-hoo! And we're actually expanding on the module content that you have in the outplacement program, all about networking, which largely takes from that book. You've already got career success, and that's actually in Decide Your Career Direction, and also about that first module that I showed you on the second slide for today. So you've got that, and career clarity is, not career success, career clarity is that one. Career success is all to do with once you get a job, how can you succeed in your new job? So I'm pretty excited about picking up that new book. And if you want to, please just sort of send an email to me through inquiries@career365.com.au and order a copy, hard copy that it is. There's a free action steps workbook for you as well. Okay, I'm going to suggest also that what you do is you circle back to your program, have a look at your modules, participate in the support group with LinkedIn. Please let me know how we can help you out by booking in a coaching session. And then, as I said, there, free plug from me about the books. And I'm not sure if you guys have ever had any thing close to writing a book, but I've now, for the last 2 and a bit years, have written 3 books, and that's why I've got no hair, I like to say. So let me open up for some questions and turn on the videos and turn off the presentation, so I might be able to engage more with you. Here we are. And you can see here actually that was the first book that that's the book which I'm renaming to do with career clarity. And that's actually going to be probably out within about 10 days or so, the career clarity one. This one here I've renamed Career Success, and again it's been reworked for a different audience, a little bit older audience. Okay, questions, anybody? Got one here. If the tools you've offered here don't feel enough to pull yourself out of a mental health role, can you recommend any resources to turn to? Yeah, look, from the start, I've mentioned that I'm so personally, I'm not trained in this particular area, but I would honestly encourage that if you're feeling dark about some things, I strongly value the following. There's Black Dog. There's Beyond Blue. There's Lifeline. And these are You OK? And these are really significantly well-respected resources. Thankfully, today we live in an environment where mental health is more acceptable, and so there are resources in place for you to be able to deal with those things. Yesterday, actually this week, I should say, I was dealing with somebody, as I started today talking about, and that was to do with somebody who was who had some really significant physical ailments that were affecting their internal chemistry and therefore their mental health space, and their health space was therefore vicious cycle also affecting their physical well-being. And it was a difficult situation, but I felt like, although I couldn't directly help them, I was able to refer them to my network of resources and some books. So there are some really significant books out there. I've mentioned Russ Harris. I'm a big fan of Russ Harris's work. He's big into a thing called ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. Any positive psychology book written in that field. So there's Martin Seligman. And that cohort, if you type in positive psychology into Kindle or into anything like that, you'll get that there. I like really being a little bit out there, and so I'll share with you that I actually have a very eclectic. I have a very, very eclectic library. At the moment, I'm reading this thing called Conscious Medicine, where Jill Edwards was able to help herself get out of having had cancer through recognizing, and this might be really out there, that she was the cause of it rather than it causing anything itself. So if you're into that side of things, where you might have a paradigm about the law of attraction or anything like that, I'm just sharing with you. It's a little out there. You may go there. She writes very, very well, and she's got some proven empirical evidence for that side of things. Not pushing it, just suggesting that you might be open to that. So those are some resources there. If you're really feeling uncomfortable with this, reach out to me and I'm happy to help. Also, there's a chance that your former employer may provide you with what's called an employee assistance program, an EAP, and they will have pathways also for counselling purposes. But we've all felt down, and the question is really, how do we want to continue feeling? Do we want to incrementally improve, ideally set something up that moves us from incrementally from one stage to another, stabilize and move up again to another level? So if we go back to the Abraham Hicks model, I'm not encouraging that or even being naive about it, that it's too hard to move from here to here around a dark feeling to a real sense of joy. But you can incrementally move up at stages, sometimes even rapidly, and then just stay at that particular point and then fall down, and then you've got to have to actually move your way back up. And that's why I wanted to feature that particular model, because I've not seen it until the last year, and I actually think it's really pretty amazing. I think about it a fair bit in my own circumstances, or the people with whom I'm dealing. So that probably, hopefully that answers that. I'm more than happy for us to finish here. I hope that gave some perspective about some things we talked about: sad, mad, glad, scared, shell-shocked, embarrassed. Let me also just share with you that in terms of, so the embarrassed feeling, in the past, and I've shared this with plenty of participants, in the past being made redundant used to come with a stigma. Please know today it's a no-brainer. It just doesn't matter one iota whatsoever. So it's a given when restructurings are taking place, COVID's happening, all that sort of stuff. So hopefully today's supported you on this side of things. I thank you again for your attendance, and please just reach out to me through inquiries at career365.com.au, where I might be able to direct you into some other resources. Until next time, we'll be doing a webinar in a couple of weeks' time. Until then, I hope that you stay safe, well, productive, and that you can give me some really good news about your circumstances. Take care.